Hello and welcome. You are watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today responded to US President Donald Trump's positive remarks on trade negotiations with India, with both leaders affirming their discussions between the two countries will continue. Taking to social media platform X, Prime Minister stated that India and the US are close friends and natural partners. He said that he is confident that the trade negotiations will pave the way for unlocking the limitless potential of the India-US partnership. This was in response to the about turn that has been done by US President Donald Trump after pushing for tariffs to the tune of 50% on India and refusing to sign any trade deal with India. So what is the reason for this about turn? Has Donald Trump come to his senses, understanding very well that it is a symbiotic relationship between India and United States of America that keep both nations afloat and prosper in terms of economy and development? Let's open up this discussion. Joining me on the telecast is Ambassador Kanwal Sibal. He's a former Secretary of India. Ambassador Sibal, I do want to understand from you, and you have been very vocal on social media as well with regards to this trade policy of Donald Trump administration that seems to be adversely impacting America more than India, and it looks like the President of America has been cognizant of the fact very recently. I think in the last 1 week, he has toned down his rhetoric against India. What are your views?
I don't think what you're saying is entirely correct. I am not in a position to judge whether Trump's policies are hurting United States and to what extent. Certainly his trade policies towards India are not hurting United States. They are hurting us. Number two, the change in tone of Trump has not occurred over the last week, because we've had his henchmen, whether it is Navarro or Besant, or for that matter, Lutnick, they have been saying pretty nasty things about India, pressing for more sanctions on India, encouraging Europe, asking Europe, in fact, to impose penalties on India, just as the United States has done for buying Russian oil. But certainly the latest post on Truth Social by Trump and an earlier one that he had also posted indicate that his overall posture is softening on India. And this is a very welcome thing, because the idea on both sides is that we should lower the rhetoric. India is not engaging in any rhetoric at the official level, but the American side is. So when India responded positively to messages that Trump posted, especially the last one,
right,
and Prime Minister actually has reacted, has responded in a very friendly way. The idea is to create the conditions for continuing the discussions on trade and reaching a fair and mutually beneficial agreement. As we say, it can't be just one-sided, of the kind that the United States has imposed on the EU and Japan and South Korea. And in addition to actually creating the right atmosphere for trade talks to resume, there is also concern in India that the kind of rhetoric that we've heard from Navarro and others is feeding a racist backlash against the Hindu community in United States, and this is worrying.
Okay.
However, one must keep in mind that Trump has not shown any sign yet that he is willing to lift the additional 25% tariffs he has imposed on India on our purchase of Russian oil, which is not a trade matter at all. It is actually asking us to do, in foreign policy terms and in our foreign policy relationships, what America would prefer us to do. Now, we'll be entering into these trade negotiations with this sort of Damocles still hanging on our head, that if at the end of the day Trump feels that we've not made enough concessions, then he can not only maintain these 25% tariffs, but he can increase them, as he has told the European Union that Europe should impose 100% tariffs on India and China if they don't stop buying Russian oil. So the jury
Okay.
is out. The first step is good. Let's keep our fingers crossed because Trump changes his mind very often. He can say this thing today, tomorrow he can say something else. So we should be cautiously hopeful.
What do you think has been the reason behind Donald Trump changing his stance? What he had been talking about India with regards to US-India trade relations, talking about how India decided to withdraw all tariff rates for US products, but he said it's too late. I'm not going to do any trade with India till the time it decides to stop purchasing fuel from Russia, to now talking about how both countries are actively negotiating, actively talking to reduce the trade barriers. What has transpired in the last week or two?
Well, actually, it's not the first time that Trump has reversed his position on so many issues. I think he believes that there is virtue in being unpredictable because it gives him the upper hand in negotiations because the other side can keep guessing as to what he may or may not do. He's not afraid of being inconsistent. I think being inconsistent is part of his art of the deal. Escalate to de-escalate, that kind of a thing. If today he has said this, tomorrow he can reverse his position. And unlike some other countries where if the leaders reverse their positions in public, they become answerable to the electorate. But in the case of Trump, he thinks that that's not necessarily the case with him. But what may have influenced his thinking is one that there has been a considerable, how should I say, soul searching in American media, especially, but also think tanks, that India is being pushed into the arms of China. I think the visuals that came from SCO, where Modi and Putin and Xi Jinping were huddled together in a very friendly way and smiling and laughing and all that. That has unnerved some in America who feel that all this is gratuitous. It's folly on the part of the United States to push India away from the United States when there is no reason to do so. And it is possible that some people may have whispered this in Trump's ears that there's no need to do this and let's not push India in the wrong direction. Maybe that has influenced his thinking. And number two, he may have been also advised by some corporate lobbies in the United States, who are worried about the consequence of US alienating India in terms of US investment and opportunities in the Indian market. So he may have heard some views from them that in the larger US national interest, there is need to tone down this. So this may be the reason, but we should not take this at face value to think that this is his final position. We will know that as time goes on, and we have the next round of discussions, and let's see what is the result of those, and whether whatever is decided satisfies Trump, because he still believes that India has to make more concessions to United States. Remember, we already had both sides agreed on an interim deal, and both sides felt that this was fair and balanced, and this was put on Trump's table, but Trump said no. He wanted a much deeper opening of the Indian market, especially agriculture and dairy and everything else. And Nick has been saying this publicly. So let's see if we make some further concessions, as we'll have to if we want to make the next round a success. But if we stick basically to our red lines and don't make the kind of concessions he expects, then I don't know what his position would be.
Okay. Ambassador Sibyl, I do want to understand from you in terms of the developments, and we follow them and join the dots. The Indian government has been very cautious in the way it approaches its foreign policy vis-a-vis China, Russia. the SCO summit where there was this informal trilateral that took place, all the three leaders, as you mentioned. But there has been an emergency BRICS virtual meeting that the Prime Minister cautiously decided to avoid. He sent his External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar to be participating in it. And do you think at a time of multilateralism and multipolarity that we witness across the globe, the power and influence of blocs, whether it is NATO, which is disintegrating, whether it is BRICS that has yet to formalize itself as a strong force to reckon with against the West, SCO, again, so many differences amongst the nations, whether it is China, Pakistan, India, and so on and so forth. It is every country for itself and looking after their own vested interests. There are no permanent foes, and you deal depending on how it suits best for you and your country.
Well, that is part of international life. Every country pursues its national interests, but nevertheless, there is great room for multilateral diplomacy and plurilateral diplomacy and regional organizations. Yes, BRICS has a role to play, and BRICS has certainly an influence on global issues because it represents the views of major emerging economies. And they pronounce on all the issues of the day that are affecting the international community. It's a different matter that they cannot impose their thinking and change the system of governance and reform international institutions, or for that matter, reduce their dependence on the dollar and trade in their own currencies as much as possible. These are not issues that can be easily handled, but nevertheless, these are bodies which have influence in terms of global views, or in terms of views that the larger international community has on the inequities of the current international system and the need to reform it. So I don't think we should dismiss BRICS and the SCO as not being effective enough in terms of changing the global system as it exists today, but this is a work in progress. It's a work in progress. We already have seen that the West and the G7 no longer have that kind of control over global affairs as they had in the past. You've talked about NATO disintegrating. I don't know if it's disintegrating. Certainly it's under pressure. That will lead to the weakening of the transatlantic alliance. If you really look at it, Western hegemony has been based on the transatlantic alliance, about Europe and United States working together, the most powerful countries in the world. Now, once that bond begins to weaken, then Western hegemony begins to weaken, and therefore there'll be more space for other countries, the non-Western countries, countries of the global South, to have more say in international governance, especially as their economies are growing. And China is in the middle of this. It has become a peer competitor of the United States. We have difficulties with China, but China's challenge to the United States does open us, and to the West does open us space for us to exert our influence on the global stage. It is helpful, even if we have bilateral differences with China. So the short point is that at the moment, the international relations are in a great flux, and we have to play our cards wisely, carefully, so that we derive the maximum advantage from this system and lower the cost to us as they would be as much as possible, and not reach any definitive conclusions about anything for the time being.
All right. Thank you, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views. I'm also being joined by Raymond Vickery. He's the former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. He's joining me from Washington, D.C. Mr. Vickery, you heard it from Ambassador Kanwal Sibal on India's point of view. Now, if you take a look at the series of developments that have taken place in the last month or so, and particularly in the last week after the SCO summit that took place, where China, India and Russia were seen together, sharing a laugh, embracing each other's opinions and ideologies. Donald Trump came out with a message that United States has lost India and Russia to the quote-unquote deep dark China. And he seemed clearly miffed that these three nations have come together and he looks at it as a challenge to the American hegemony, so to say. Why do you think Trump has made this turnaround where he is now once again on the negotiating table talking about reducing trade barriers and negotiating and cooperating with India and United States of America to reach a deal that is going to be acceptable mutually?
Well, thanks very much for having me. There's no question in my mind that the two largest and I would argue greatest democracies in the world have a lot in common, whether it be defending against China, whether it be defending democratic values, people to people. All these are very important. So what Prime Minister Modi has recently posted on social media is exactly right in terms of being natural partners and needing to cooperate. That having been said, waging peace and prosperity requires both strategy and partners. Unfortunately, our president, President Trump, has no strategy. And really, it's not for him about partners, it's about him. He wants to have the Nobel Peace Prize. He wants to be seen as the great man of the century. That's not a way in which to promote peace and prosperity. And unfortunately, the zigzagging and up and down which occurs and has occurred with President Trump and his pronouncements about U.S.-India relations has already done great harm. We were in a period in which the U.S. And India were reconciling and moving toward partnership, and he has pushed that forward progress back and made it in his image of one of transactions rather than a relationship. I have no doubt that the major factor in going forward is, in Donald Trump's mind, is Donald Trump and what's going to be best for him. If he thinks he can get the Nobel Peace Prize by throwing India under the bus, he'll do it. If, on the other hand, he feels that the way forward for him is reconciliation, he'll do that as well. I have no doubt that his approach to India has raised a great opposition in the United States from the Indian American community, which is very prominent among the policy think tanks, and even in his own administration. I can't conceive that there has been a uniform approval of his very erratic behavior. Now the question is, if you have some thaw, do you say, yes, we have achieved and we go forward? Obviously, we have not. And it is now up to saner heads, both on the Indian and the U.S. side, to try to limit the damage which has been done by this erratic behavior. And I think it's a time really when India needs to consider its own interests, not just in terms of defending its borders or aggrandizement, but what its own interests are in terms of its values. I have no doubt that India does not have more in common with the China-Russia no limits partnership than it does with the U.S. and the democracies of Europe, Japan, Australia. But India has to decide for itself. I also have no doubt that India needs to push its own domestic reforms in terms of market solutions, in terms of lowering barriers to trade. These are not necessarily to please the United States, but India needs to decide for itself, as it is doing, and provide leadership based upon its own values and way forward. So yes, this is a welcome development, but it is no means dispositive of what the cooperative relationship should be between the United States and India.
Okay, I do want to understand from you your perception and the perception of people in America and across the globe, countries. Do you think democracies are at this point of time even able to take Trump seriously? Because as you said, he's trigger happy. Today he will write something on his Twitter post, on his social media post, and tomorrow he would just take a complete about turn. So there is no way to trust Donald Trump and where his foreign policy or trade policy is going to take him. And with him are the future of a number of countries attached.
Well, I think that's exactly right, unfortunately. But it is an issue which Donald Trump is an issue which has to be dealt with, one whether we like it or not. And that means that people on both sides need to look at where they can provide leadership in accordance with the democratic values which have made India and the United States great. The United States under Trump, Trump has relinquished the position of leader of the free world. It's pretty obvious in terms of his approach that the approach is one of his own ego, his own narcissism, narcissistic approaches. And at that time, India needs to be able to reach to other great democracies, whether they be in Europe, whether they be Japan, Australia, and try to get us through this very, very difficult period. Trump isn't going to be around forever. There is a grave question, of course, whether he has the authority to levy these tariffs at all. He's gone against the U.S. Constitution in terms of checks and balances by the courts, by the Congress, and the Supreme Court is deciding right now, or is considering the question of whether he has the authority at all in regard to tariffs. So it's not a question of being able to just disregard Trump. It's a question of how you act in accordance with democratic values to build peace and prosperity in an institutional way. Institutional reform in international affairs is very much needed, but it's not a matter of just tearing the system down. It's what you're going to replace it with.
Right.
And India has much leadership to provide in that regard.
Absolutely. Raymond Vickery, thank you very much for joining me, sharing your views. That has been an insightful conversation about Trump's foreign policy and, of course, the way he functions as the president, as the head of the United States of America, and how it impacts the rest of the world. I'm also being joined by Dr. Ajay Dua. He's the former Commerce Secretary of India. Dr. Dua, thank you very much for being part of this conversation on NewsX. And how do you think, the markets have reacted very positively right after that comment came from Donald Trump and the reciprocation that was shown by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But do you think this is short-lived? Are we at this point in time to live in anticipation? We don't know what is going to happen. It looks uncertain. Everything is dependent on the American administration led by a very mercurial president.
Megha, thank you. The response of the Indian, or the reaction on the Indian stock exchanges is understandable. Any good news, and there isn't much coming nowadays, as you know, particularly from the United States vis-a-vis India, shoots up, helps boost take the stock exchange, the indices up. That's what's happened. But for it to sustain that much more than just comments from President Trump, and naturally the reciprocation which has come from the Prime Minister, that was the Indian Prime Minister, that was desirable and was needed, and he's done that. But to keep it going, I think the response has again to come from the United States. They are serious about a deal with India, getting India on board again and not in the troika, what probably seems to have upset the cart in the U.S. in those photographs seen in SEO last week. And that means President Trump has to react by saying that he wants the negotiations to be resumed earliest, the BTA to be signed, and that the Russia-Ukraine dispute doesn't, and the Indian stock market, Indian trade, those are not matters to be linked as he seems to have done. He must keep the Russia-Ukraine dispute and his Nobel Peace Prize, as Mr. Sibal was talking about earlier, separately, not link it up with India. With India, what's required is he must lift the 25% penalties because of India having been wronged. And he is taking on a country which didn't or doesn't possess the same leverage as the Chinese do and as the European Union has, because he didn't act against them. So first move has to come from the US, and that's about the penalties. Thereafter, keep the 25%, what you have ad hoc imposed upon India. So we know that while our negotiators are on the job in the BTA, which must now be held almost continuously till a deal is signed by, say, Indian Dasera, which is, or Indian Diwali even, which is about 5 weeks.
Also, the stark contrast in the way there has been a change in tone of President Donald Trump and how he has been engaging with India in the last week or two versus his trade negotiator Peter Navarro, who has been rabid in his commentary against India, using some really volatile terms with regards to India purchasing oil from Russia, saying that India is the path to ensuring peace in Ukraine. When we all understand that's far from the truth. Now, why do you think there are two parallel narratives coming from the American administration? Even as we talk about the Trump tweet that has been brought about, talking about how there is a need for addressing these trade barriers between India and America, and Donald Trump would be talking to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and he's calling him a very good friend, Narendra Modi, in the coming week or two. And at the same time, there is a news report. Now, this is not something that has been said by Trump. It's a report that has been put out in Financial Times, which says that Trump administration is pushing European Union to impose 100% tariffs, secondary tariffs on India, and simply is because of the Russian fuel issue. Again, a question: why the two parallel, contrasting narratives?
Megha, I think there are far too many people in the United States administration who are commenting about the tariff matters and the tariffs, particularly in the context of India. First, one, it is the person you named, Peter Navarro, who is an advisor. He was a junior employee, or say middle-level employee in Trump's first term. He was a director-level person in his administration. Second is Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is talking his own bit. And then there is the USTR, that's Mr. Greer. All three of them, I think they are out trying to outdo one another in proving their loyalty to President Trump. As you saw in a particular cabinet meeting, which was not too long ago, every member of the cabinet, the US cabinet, only was going gaga about what a great guy their president, their boss is. I think we'll have to soon start ignoring. And in the fourth person, of course, there is Rubio, a little more sensible than the other three, but he is also involved because of the Ukraine-Russia war involvement. Far too many people commenting. Let's look at what the president does himself the President Trump has to now make, the next move which we should take seriously is if President Trump talks about removal of the penalty on India, then we hope that he really wants to be serious and have negotiations, have our team start working again.
Right.
Otherwise, it is going to be one step forward, two step backwards. The question of one doesn't even know whether 200% or 100% duty, which EU is being asked to impose on India, from where did it emanate? Is it a considered decision of the president, or is it one of these 3 or 4 gentlemen in his cabinet who just keep shooting off their hip? I think that with so many spokesmen, so many comments coming, we should really now start underplaying those and see what the president himself has to say, and then move forward.
It's also interesting to note that there has not been a single European country. The German foreign minister came to India last week, and he has not made any mention of putting secondary sanctions on India because India buys oil from Russia. The European Union president and the European Council president both had a joint phone call with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and they have been pushing for a free trade agreement to be signed between India and European Union by the end of this year. There has not been any mention of sanctions that they intend to impose. There is the United, even the United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer is coming to India in October, and this is right after the FTA that has been signed between India and UK. There has not been any mention of additional tariffs being imposed, punitive tariffs being imposed on India. So is America isolated in its penalization of India for purchasing oil is the question.
The way the US is heading, I think very soon the word which you use, isolation, is going to be a fact on the ground. Because so far, I have not heard of any country supporting the United States for this imposition. Not even the countries which are still with the United States, who have not been alienated, and you can count those on your fingertips. I don't want to start counting those, but they are only a handful, but everybody everybody worth the while. Not one voice has come in support of imposition upon India, a higher imposition than what he has already done.
Yeah.
In fact, privately, and those things keep coming out, the various press, media and otherwise, people are saying that India is been singled out for no fault of its. United States encouraged India to continue buying the oil from Russia because it was helping stabilize the international prices, and the beneficiaries included the United States, as you know, and most of the industrialized world. Otherwise, at that point of time, when that war had started, it was being said that if the Russian oil is not, or Russian energy is not taken by the market, it's sanctioned, the prices could go up to $200 a barrel.
Right.
As against what we paying, 45.60 or 45.75, $45.75 a barrel, the average price which we paid for the Russian oil. And you recall, Megha, that the Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary of the US, at that point of time, publicly lauded India for stabilizing the prices and said, as long as it's a discounted, and she just had one kind of a proviso, saying as long as it is bought below a particular price, that meant as long as Russia is discounting it, we have no issue at all about it. It was repeated by another trade official soon thereafter, and earlier the then ambassador to India, the US ambassador, had also said, we are happy.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Dr. Ajay Dua, thank you very much for joining me and talking to me on NewsX on this very important, sensitive matter, which is the trade tariffs between US and India. On that note, I slip into a short break. Thanks for watching NewsX.